The first time I saw King Caelen up close, he was not wearing a crown. He was standing alone in the winter gallery, where the palace keeps its oldest warnings. Tapestries stitched with battles that never ended, portraits of rulers who smiled with their eyes empty, and, at the center, the law tablet of Larethiel, a slab of moonstone carved with letters so sharp they looked freshly cut. Every child in the Evergrove knew the law by heart. The elf. King must take a political bride from the 7 noble lines chosen by the High Council to bind the realm and prevent the old civil bloodshed from returning. Simple, clean, merciless. I was not from any noble line. I was not chosen for anything except silence. I should never have been in that gallery at all. I had come to return a set of ceremonial sashes to the steward's office. I was a ward of the palace, a girl taken in after my mother died. At the border outpost, raised on the edges of grandeur like ivy clinging to stone. Useful, invisible, grateful. Those were the virtues expected of someone like me. But the steward had sent me down the wrong corridor, and the guards had mistaken my plain gray cloak for a servant's uniform. No one stopped me. That was the danger of being unseen. You could slip anywhere, even into places where your life could be erased for trespass. I realized my mistake too late. The air in the winter gallery was colder than the rest of the palace, as if the stone itself remembered punishment. Candlelight floated in glass orbs, trembling, and there he was, the king, his silver hair loose over his shoulders, his hands clasped behind his back as he studied the law tablet. He did not turn when I froze at the threshold. He said, without looking at me, "If you leave now, the guards will assume you stole something." My lungs tightened. "I didn't. I got lost. That's worse," he murmured. "Lost people are always hiding from something." I should have curtsied. I should have apologized until my tongue bled. Instead, the words that came out were the truth I never said aloud. "I'm hiding from being noticed." The king finally turned. His eyes were not the soft green so many bards love to sing about. They were darker, storm-bright, like deep forest, leaves after rain. There was exhaustion in them, too, the kind that came from carrying rules that had nothing to do with wisdom and everything to do with survival. He looked at me as if measuring whether I was real. "You're Aelira," he said. No one important knew my name. My stomach dropped. "How do you move like you're expecting a blow," he said quietly. I noticed things. The candle orbs hissed, as if they disliked the intimacy of that sentence. I clutched the folded sashes tighter, my fingers going numb. "I shouldn't be here, Your Majesty." "No," he agreed. "You shouldn't." He walked past me, slow, deliberate, like a predator choosing not to hunt. When he reached the door, he paused and tapped 2 fingers against the frame, a sound as crisp as a verdict. "Tell no one you saw me with the law tablet," he said. My heart hammered. "Why?" "Because tomorrow the council will parade in here and pretend the law is holy," he replied, "and they'll use it to chain me." Before I could stop myself, I asked the question that had been burning in every corner of the palace for weeks. "Is it true they're forcing you to marry Princess Vaelith from the Sun Court?" His mouth tightened, just slightly. "They call it forcing when it's done to people like you," he said. "When it's done to kings, they call it duty." Then he was gone, and the gallery felt even colder without him. That night, the palace buzzed like a disturbed hive. Servants whispered in doorways. Guards moved in pairs. The High Council had arrived at dusk, cloaked in ceremonial blues and whites, each of them wearing the same expression, calm authority built on fear. I lay awake in my narrow attic room, staring at the beams above my bed, listening to the wind press against the tower windows. I told myself the king's words meant nothing. I was a shadow in a palace full of light. Whatever chains they meant for him, they would never connect to me. I was wrong. At dawn, a messenger in official livery appeared at the servants' staircase, asking for Aelira of the ward register. My name sounded strange in his mouth, like a weapon. He did not hand me a note. He handed me a summons sealed with black wax, the king's seal. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. The housekeeper's eyes sharpened as she watched. "What did you do?" "Nothing," I whispered, because it was true, and because truth is never a shield when people want a reason to blame you. I broke the seal with a fingernail and read the single line inside. "Come to the Court of Branches. Now. Wear no colors. No colors. No house allegiance. No statement. Invisible." I dressed in plain linen and tied my hair back with string, the way I did when I wanted to disappear. As I made my way through back corridors, I felt eyes on me. That was new. That was terrifying. The Court of Branches was the palace's heart, an open-air hall where living trees arched overhead, and their woven limbs formed a ceiling of emerald light. Nobles gathered there to watch judgments, celebrations, and declarations that altered history. When I stepped into the court, every conversation thinned. as if sound itself had been ordered to stand aside. They were all there, the High Council in their crescent formation, lords and ladies in jeweled robes, envoys from the Sun Court, radiant in gold-threaded silk, knights with handrests near their blades, even the palace bards, perched like birds on the stone railings, ready to memorize whatever the king would say. And at the center, upon the root throne carved from the oldest oak in the realm, sat King Caelen. This time, he was wearing the crown. It was not heavy, not the way human crowns were rumored to be. It was slender, shaped like intertwined branches, set with a single moonstone that caught the morning light and threw it back as a pale flame. He looked out over them all with a face like winter, beautiful, controlled, and capable of ending you without raising his voice. His gaze found me immediately. Not a flicker of surprise, not a moment of searching, as if he had known exactly where I would stand. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I heard my name whispered again and again, confused, curious, hungry. I wanted to run. My legs refused. The Chancellor of the Council, Lord Therion, stepped forward with a scroll. "By the binding edict of Larethiel," he proclaimed, "the crown shall take a political bride of the 7 noble lines. The council has selected—" "Enough," King Caelen said. The single word cracked through the cord of branches like a branch snapping under weight. Silence fell so hard, it felt physical. Lord Therion blinked. "Your Majesty," I said. "Enough," the king repeated, calm as a blade. He rose from the root throne, and the trees above seemed to lean toward him, leaves trembling. He descended the steps slowly. Each footfall felt like a drumbeat in my ribs. He stopped in front of me, so close I could see the fine scars on his knuckles, the faint shadow under his eyes, the way his breathing changed, just slightly, as if he had been holding it back for days. He turned, facing the court, and lifted his hand. "I will not take the bride you have chosen," he said. A collective inhale. Somewhere, a lady gasped. Someone laughed once, sharp and disbelieving, then fell silent again. Lord Therion's face tightened into outrage. "Your Majesty, the law was written to prevent civil war," King Caelen said, voice steady, "but it has become a weapon for those who want to rule through my bloodline." He extended his hand toward me without looking down. "Aelira," he said, and the way he spoke my name made it sound like a vow. My skin went cold. The court stared as if I had grown horns. I did not move. I could not breathe. His fingers waited in the air between us, a bridge over an abyss. "If you take my hand," he said softly, so only I could hear, "they will never let you go back to being invisible," I whispered, barely forming the words. "Why me?" His eyes held mine, and for a moment the crown looked less like power and more like a cage. "Because I need a bride they cannot control," he murmured, "and because I have already broken the law once." Before I could ask what he meant, Lord Therion's voice thundered across the court. "This is treason against the binding edict," Steel rasped as knights shifted. The Sun Court envoys stiffened, their smiles vanishing. And then King Caelen did the unthinkable. He turned back to the court and said clearly, for all to hear, "I choose her." The world tilted. If you want to keep watching this story unfold, comment where you're listening from and subscribe to the channel, because what happens after I take his hand will change everything in the Evergrove. Tell me if you approve this first part, and I'll continue with the next. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The court of branches held its breath the way forests do before lightning strikes. Leaves hung motionless. Sunlight poured through the canopy in pale shafts, landing on faces that had forgotten how to hide their hunger for spectacle. I stared at the king's outstretched hand. It was steady, calm, patient in the way of someone who had already accepted the consequences. My own hands felt like they belonged to another body. They were cold, damp, still holding the plain certainty of the life I'd lived until this moment. Corridors, errands, quiet corners, a name spoken only when someone needed something carried or cleaned or mended. If I took his hand, that life would end. If I refused, I might still lose it. Because the High Council had already seen me. The nobles had already tasted my name. In their world, being noticed without permission was a crime all its own. King Caelen leaned closer, so the crowd would read the gesture as tenderness instead of urgency. "Look at me," he whispered. I forced my eyes up. His face was composed, but his gaze burned with a kind of controlled defiance that made my stomach flip. He looked like a man stepping into a storm on purpose, daring it to strike first. "You're not choosing me," he said softly. "You're choosing yourself. Choose to live." I didn't know what he meant by that. Not fully, but something inside me, something I'd kept locked away for years, rose like a bird finally finding air. I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and sure. The moment our skin touched, a shiver raced up my arm. Not magical, not some dramatic glow from a storybook, but a real, human-alive jolt that made my chest ache. A murmur surged through the court. Lord Therian's voice rang out, sharp as iron. "This is a violation of the binding edict. You cannot simply—" "I can," King Caelen said, and he lifted our joined hands, displaying them to everyone. "I am the crown. You are the crown because we allow it," Lord Therian snapped, and the audacity of that sentence made several nobles flinch. "The council safeguards tradition. The 7 lines maintain unity. A ward of the palace is not eligible. She is not of noble blood. She is not sanctioned." I felt every gaze pin me like a specimen. Ward, not even my name. King Caelen didn't tighten his grip, but I sensed a shift in him, the way a sword shifts when it's drawn halfway. "Then sanction her," he said. Gasps again, louder this time. I heard a hissed whisper from somewhere behind me. "He's gone mad." Lord Therian unrolled his scroll with a theatrical snap. "There are procedures, there are proofs, there are ceremonies, and there is the Sun Court." At the mention of the Sun Court, the golden-robed envoys stepped forward in unison. Their leader, a woman with hair like molten copper and eyes like polished amber, bowed slightly. "Your Majesty," she said, voice sweet enough to hide poison, "Princess Vaelith has traveled 7 nights to honor this union. The Sun Court has prepared treaties of grain, defense, and passage through the Dawn Strait. The realm's prosperity hinges upon this marriage." She turned her gaze to me, and her smile sharpened. "Surely you would not endanger thousands for sentiment." My throat tightened. Sentiment. As if I were a whim. As if the king's choice were a childish tantrum. King Caelen's expression didn't change, but the air around him seemed to grow colder. "Prosperity built on coerced vows is rot," he said. "If the Sun Court's alliance depends on my obedience, then it is not an alliance. It is a leash." The copper-haired envoy's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned brighter. "So you admit you will break the law?" "I admit the law is broken," he replied. Lord Therian's face went red. "You will plunge us into civil unrest. The 7 lines will rebel. The Sun Court will withdraw. Our borders are already bleeding." King Caelen cut in, and there was steel now, unmistakable. "You keep telling the realm we need a political bride to prevent war, while you starve the outposts and steal their taxes for your feasts." A ripple of shock. I felt the nobles shift, uneasy, as if the king had spoken a truth they preferred to bury under silk. Lord Therian's mouth opened, then closed. "You speak recklessly." "No," King Caelen said. "I speak openly, for once." Then he turned to me. The entire court watched, waiting for him to display me like a trophy. Instead, his voice softened, but it didn't lose its strength. "Aelira, by choosing you, I place you in danger. I will not lie to you. They will come for you first because you are the easiest piece to break." My breath hitched. "Then why?" "Because you are also the hardest to predict," he said, eyes steady. "They don't know you. They haven't trained you. They haven't bought you. And I have seen what you do when you think no one is watching. I didn't understand. What do I do?" He glanced toward the trees above us, where the sunlight threaded through leaves like silver needles. "You endure," he said simply, "and you still remain kind." My chest tightened at that, not with pride, but with an unfamiliar grief. Kindness had never been rewarded in my life. It had only been taken. Lord Therian slammed the butt of his staff against the stone. "Enough theater. Guards, remove the girl from the court. This farce ends now." 2 knights moved. I felt my body tense, instinct screaming to pull away, to vanish, to become small and harmless again. But King Caelen stepped forward, placing himself between me and the knights. His voice, when it came, was quiet. "Touch her," he said, "and you declare war on the crown." The knights hesitated. I saw it clearly then. The palace was not one kingdom. It was a nest of competing powers, all pretending to be one tree, while their roots strangled each other underground. The knights looked at Lord Therian. Lord Therian looked at the Sun Court envoys. The envoys looked at the nobles. The nobles looked anywhere but at the king. And somewhere in that web of fear, I realized something dangerous. They were afraid of him, not because he was cruel, because he was willing. Lord Therian's lips curled. "You would spill elven blood for a ward?" King Caelen didn't blink. "I would spill my own first." Silence. Then a new voice cut through it, bright and laughing. "Well," it said, "this is delicious." I turned. Princess Vaelith stepped out of the Sun Court cluster, her gown a cascade of gold and white, her throat adorned with a sunstone that pulsed softly, as if it carried heat inside. She was even more beautiful than rumor had promised. The the kind of beauty that made people forgive cruelty because they wanted to be near it. She examined me like a jewel held up to light. "So this is her," Vaelith said, and she circled slowly, never asking permission. Plain, unadorned, no house colors, no embroidery, no weapons, no obvious ambition. Her gaze slid to my ears, the delicate taper that marked me elf as surely as blood. "But you stand straight," she added, thoughtful. "Interesting," I swallowed. "Princess." She smiled wider. "Oh, don't be polite now. It makes this less fun." King Caelen's jaw tightened. "Vaelith." She turned to him with an exaggerated sigh. "My king, you're making this terribly inconvenient. Do you know how many treaties my father wrote based on the assumption you would behave?" "I never promised to be obedient," Caelen said. Vaelith's eyes gleamed. "No, you promised to be wise. And this," she waved a hand toward me, "this seems like impulse." Then she leaned close enough that I could smell something sharp and citrus on her skin. "Tell me," she whispered, "just for me, do you love him?" My face went hot. I didn't even know him. Not really. Vaelith straightened before I could finish. "Exactly," she announced to the court, delighted. "She doesn't." A wave of murmurs. Lord Therion seized the opening like a starving man. "You see? She cannot even claim affection. This is not a union. It's a scandal." King Caelen's voice cut through the noise. "It is a choice." Vaelith tilted her head. "Then let's make it official. You want to break the law? Fine. But the law has teeth." She turned to the council. "Does the binding edict not include the trial of roots?" Several councilors went still. My stomach dropped at their reaction. Lord Therion's eyes glinted. "It does." I looked between them, confused. "What is that?" King Caelen's grip tightened for the first time, just slightly, like a warning. Vaelith smiled at me, radiant and cruel. "It's a little tradition," she said. "If the king refuses the council's bride, the chosen substitute must prove she can withstand the realm's judgment." My mouth went dry. "How?" Vaelith's smile widened. "She enters the root vault beneath the palace and faces what the Evergrove itself thinks of her. If she is accepted, the law bends. If she is rejected..." Her eyes flicked over me, savoring the moment. "She doesn't come back." The court erupted into whispers. My knees threatened to give out. I looked at King Caelen, expecting him to deny it, to call it a lie, to end this game. But his face had gone even paler. "It's real," I whispered. He leaned close, voice low. "It's real, and it's what they've wanted all along. They can't defy me." "Openly, so they'll try to remove you and force my hand." My heart pounded so loud I could hardly hear. Vaelith clasped her hands, pretending innocence. Of course, she could refuse. She could step aside and return to her quiet little life. Quiet life. There was no going back now, not after this. My mind flashed to corridors, to invisibility, to the attic room where I'd pretended my loneliness was safety. Then I thought of that law tablet, of the king staring at it like it was a shackle, and of his words in the gallery. Lost people are always hiding from something. I lifted my chin. "I'll do it," I said. The court went silent again, as if the trees themselves were listening. Vaelith's brows lifted, impressed despite herself. "Oh, very good." Lord Therion smiled like a man who'd just won without drawing blood. "Then it is settled. At moonrise, the ward will enter the root vault. If she survives, the council will consider this irregular union." He said consider like he meant never. King Caelen's voice went sharp. "You promised the trial would never be used again." Lord Therion spread his hands. "And yet here we are, your majesty. The law is holy, remember?" Vaelith's gaze met mine one last time, gleaming. "Try not to scream too much," she said lightly. "It ruins the acoustics." The court dispersed in a swirl of silk and satisfaction. King Caelen did not release my hand until the last noble had gone. When we were finally alone beneath the living canopy, he turned to me, and for the first time, the king looked like a man who was scared. "I'm sorry," he said. I swallowed hard. "For what?" "For pulling you into this," he said, voice rougher. "For needing you." I laughed once, brittle. "You didn't need me. You could have chosen some minor noble and still upset them." He shook his head. "No, they would have owned her. They would have poisoned her with favors and threats until she became another council mouthpiece. I needed someone outside their roots." He lifted my hand, turning my palm upward, studying it like he was memorizing the lines. "Listen to me," he said softly. "In the root vault, the Evergrove will show you what you fear most. It will try to make you kneel. It will try to convince you that you are unworthy of standing beside me." My throat tightened. "Am I?" His eyes snapped up to mine. "Aelira," he said, and my name in his mouth was not a command. It was an answer. Worth is not granted by councils. It is claimed. I didn't know why tears stung my eyes. Maybe because no one had ever spoken to me like that. Maybe because I could feel the trap closing and still, somehow I wanted to believe him. He stepped closer, lowering his voice even. More. There's one more thing, he said. What? He hesitated, like the truth hurt. I broke the law before, he admitted. Not with marriage, with mercy. Years ago, I spared someone the council wanted executed. That person swore loyalty to me. My pulse jumped. Who? His gaze flicked toward the palace shadows. The one who will guide you out of the root vault, he said. If you can hold on long enough to find them. Moonrise suddenly felt like an execution date. I forced myself to breathe. Then tell me how to survive. King Caelen's mouth curved, just barely. Not a smile, but something softer. Meet me tonight, he said. Before the trial, I will teach you the one thing the council never wanted you to learn. What's that? He leaned in, and the leaves above us rustled as if the trees themselves were leaning closer too. How to say no without lowering your head. Approve this part, and I'll continue with the next. Moonrise came too fast. All day the palace felt like it was holding its breath, the way the Evergrove does before a storm. Servants avoided my eyes. Nobles stared openly now, no longer pretending I belonged to the furniture. Even the guards at the stairwells stood a little straighter when I passed, like they wanted to remember my face in case it became a story later. She went down into the root vault and never returned. I tried not to imagine it. By late afternoon, I was sent to a small bathing room near the eastern wing. 2 maids I did not know waited inside with basins of warmed water and a folded dress the color of river stone. When I touched the fabric, my fingers caught on faint embroidery. Not decorative, but protective. Tiny stitched runes hidden in the seams, subtle enough that most would miss them. The maids did not speak. Their silence felt rehearsed. When they finished, one of them pressed a narrow vial into my palm. Clear liquid, no label. I closed my fingers around it. What is this? The maid glanced at the door, then lowered her voice. For your throat, if the air below burns. 1 sip, only 1. Before I could ask more, both maids bowed and left as if they had never been there. I stood alone in the steam, staring at my own reflection in the mirror. I looked like myself, but not like my life. My ears were still mine, my eyes still mine, but my posture was different. The fear in my face did not disappear, yet it was joined by something else, something stubborn, something that had finally stepped forward. A knock came, soft, then 2 taps, a rhythm that felt intentional. I opened the door and found a palace runner holding a lantern. This way, he said, and did not wait for me to answer. He led me through corridors I had never walked, behind tapestry walls and through narrow passages built for servants and secrets. The palace was old, and it had veins. We moved through them like blood. At last we reached an unmarked door of dark wood. The runner knocked once, then left without a word. I hesitated, then stepped inside. The room was small, lit by a single lamp. A training circle had been drawn on the floor in chalk, imperfect but clear. A table stood near the wall with a dagger, a coil of ribbon, and a cup of water. King Caelen waited near the window, his crown gone again, his hair tied back. He looked younger without the weight on his head, and more dangerous too, like a storm without ceremony. You came, he said. I tried to keep my voice steady. You summoned me. His gaze swept over me, taking in the rune-sewn dress, the pinned hair, the bare hands. They dressed you like an offering. I swallowed. I am an offering. No, he said, and the word landed like a hand on my shoulder. You are a test. They want to see if you break. He stepped into the chalk circle and nodded for me to follow. I walked in and immediately felt it, the change in air. Like the circle itself demanded attention. He picked up the ribbon from the table and held it out. What is this? I asked. A leash, he replied, then corrected himself. A lesson. He motioned for me to extend my hands. When I did, he wrapped the ribbon around my wrists. Not tight, just enough to remind me it was there. My pulse spiked. Is this necessary? Yes, he said, calm, because everyone in your life has trained you to accept what you hate, to endure what you should refuse. The root vault will use that. It will show you every time you swallowed your own voice. My throat tightened. I do not have a voice to swallow. He stepped closer until I could see the fine, tired lines at the corners of his eyes. Then borrow mine until yours returns. The words hit me harder than any threat had. He tugged the ribbon once, gentle, not cruel. Now, say no. I stared at him. No, he shook his head. Not as a sound, as a decision. Heat rose in my face, part anger, part humiliation. I said it. You whispered it like you were apologizing, he said. Again, the ribbon tugged once more, slightly firmer. Something in me flared, the old ache of being corrected, of never doing anything right. I drew a breath, deeper this time. No, he watched me closely. Better. Again. No, he nodded. Again. And do not look down. My eyes lifted fully to his. No. Silence settled between us. Not awkward, not gentle either. It felt like the space between two drawn blades. He stepped back and unwrapped the ribbon, then placed it on the table as if it had lost its power. Good, he said. Now, the second lesson. He picked up the dagger and held it by the blade, offering me the handle. My stomach turned. I had never held a weapon. Not truly. The palace did not arm its wards. I took it. The weight surprised me, honest and simple. This is not for killing, he said. It is for remembering you are allowed to take up space. I forced a thin breath through my nose. Space is what they will bury me in. Caelen's jaw tightened, like he hated that I might be right. If the root vault tries to convince you that you are nothing, you must answer it with motion, not thought. Motion cuts through fear. He moved around me, slow, precise. Hold it low, not like a soldier, like someone who refuses to be grabbed. He guided my stance with 2 fingers at my elbow, then at my shoulder. The touch was brief and professional, but it sent a strange current through me anyway. A reminder that I was not alone in this room, not entirely. Again, he said, and I repeated the stance. Now, if someone reaches for you, do not pull away. That is what prey does. You step in. I blinked. Step in? He demonstrated, moving toward me with an open hand, not threatening, just approaching. My instinct screamed to retreat. I almost did. He stopped. Do you feel that? The urge to shrink? Yes, I admitted. Step in. I swallowed and moved forward a half step, bringing the dagger close to my side, my wrist firm. He smiled. Just a small shift. The first real warmth I had seen on his face. There. It was absurd. How a single step made me feel taller. I lowered the dagger slightly. Why are you doing this for me? His smile faded. He looked away for a moment, as if choosing words carefully. Because I watched the council decide your fate in seconds, he said, and I realized I was the only person in that court who asked whether you wanted any of it. My chest tightened. No one had asked. Not even me. And, I whispered, and you still took my hand, he said. That is either foolish or brave. I am betting on brave. I set the dagger back on the table before my hands started shaking. He poured water into the cup and handed it to me. Our fingers brushed, and the contact felt too intimate for such a simple thing. I drank anyway, because the dryness in my throat had become a kind of panic. About the person you spared, I said, remembering. The one who will guide me out. Caelen's eyes sharpened. They are not safe to name openly. Then how do I find them? I asked. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small token, a piece of carved bark shaped like a leaf. He pressed it into my palm. If you get lost, he said, hold this, and think of the sound of rain on stone. It will pull you toward them. I stared at the token. Does the root vault respond to thoughts? It responds to truth, he said, and you are full of truths you were never allowed to say. I closed my fingers around the carved leaf. What if the Evergrove rejects me? His voice lowered. Then they will claim it was fate. The council will force Vaelith into my bed, and they will call it peace, and I will become the king they want, a crown without a spine. I felt a jolt of anger at the image, sharp and unexpected. You will not, I said. He studied me as if hearing something new. Say that again. I met his gaze. You will not. For a moment the room was quiet, except for the faint wind at the window. Then he stepped closer, not touching this time, just close enough that I could feel the heat of him. Then survive, he said, softly. Survive, and give me a reason to tear their law apart without the realm turning against us. A knock sounded at the door, heavy and official. Caelen's face went hard. He moved to the door and opened it a hand's width. A guard spoke from the hall. Your Majesty, moonrise approaches. The council requests the ward. Requests? Like I was a borrowed object. Caelen closed the door and turned to me. One more thing, he said. My heart hammered. What? He took the ribbon from the table and tied it around my wrist. Not binding, just a simple loop, like a reminder. When they speak to you, he said, they will try to make you answer quickly. Fear makes people eager. Do not be eager. Let your silence become your blade. I nodded, throat too tight for words. He opened the door again. The corridor beyond looked longer than it should have, shadows stretching like fingers. As I stepped out, Caelen's voice followed me, low and fierce. Aelira, he said. I turned back. If you feel the vault closing in, he said, do not pray for rescue. Pray for clarity. And remember this. He paused, like the words mattered enough to risk being overheard. I chose you on purpose. The guard led me away before I could answer. Down we went, through stairs that spiraled beneath the palace, past doors that grew older with every step, until the air changed, damp and cold, smelling of earth and roots and something faintly metallic. We stopped before a stone archway carved with twisting branches. Torches burned with greenish flame. Lord Therion waited there with 2 counselors, his expression satisfied. Princess Vaelith stood nearby, radiant as ever, her eyes bright with anticipation. Well, Valeth said, smiling. Ready to become a legend or a warning? My fingers tightened around the carved leaf token hidden in my sleeve. Lord Therion raised his staff. Enter, he commanded, and let the Evergrove judge you. The stone doors groaned open. Darkness breathed out. I stepped forward, and the air inside the root vault touched my skin like cold water. Behind me, the doors began to close, and in the shrinking gap of light, I saw Caelen at the top of the stairwell, watching, unmoving, as if he could hold the world open with his will. Then the doors sealed shut. The last sound I heard was Princess Valeth's soft laugh, and the first sound inside the vault was my own name, whispered from the darkness in a voice that was not mine. Aelira, tell me if you approve this part, and I will continue with the next. The darkness in the root vault was not empty. It had texture, like damp velvet pressed against my eyes. The moment the stone doors sealed shut behind me, the air changed. Again, heavier, laced with the scent of wet soil and old sap. I lifted my hands in front of my face and saw nothing. Then my name came again, closer this time, spoken in a voice that sounded like mine, but wrong, as if it had learned my tone from listening through walls. Aelira. My throat tightened so fast I almost gagged. I remembered the vial the maid had slipped into my palm. My fingers found it inside the sleeve seam of my dress. I uncorked it with my teeth and took a single sip. The burn was immediate, not pain, more like waking up. My lungs pulled in air without fighting it, and my mind cleared just enough for fear to stop running the whole show. The floor beneath my boots was stone, but it was slick with moisture. I took one careful step forward. Something breathed, not a creature. The vault itself. A slow inhale, a slow exhale, like the Evergrove's roots were a single sleeping body wrapped around me. A faint green glow pulsed somewhere ahead. It was not torchlight. It was the soft bioluminescence of roots, thin veins of light running through the walls like living script. I followed it, because there was nothing else to follow. The corridor widened into a round chamber. In its center stood a tree, not planted in soil, grown through stone. Its trunk was pale and twisted, its branches reaching up into darkness I could not see. On its bark, carved deep, were the same sharp letters as the law tablet, the binding edict. My stomach dropped. The roots beneath my feet shifted barely, like something adjusting its grip. Then the whispers began in full, not one voice, many. Servants, nobles, the housekeeper who used to snap at me when I stood in the wrong place, guards who pretended they did not see me, counselors who called me ward as if it was my true name, all of them, speaking at once, circling me, tightening like a net. She does not belong. She will ruin him. She is nothing. I pressed my palm against my chest, trying to slow my heartbeat. Caelen's lesson echoed in my mind. They will try to make you answer quickly. I did not answer. I stood still, and I let the noise wash over me without opening my mouth. The voices grew sharper, irritated, as if silence offended them. The chamber blurred. Suddenly I was not in the vault. I was in my attic room again. The same narrow bed, the same beams above, the same window that rattled when the wind got cruel. Only now the room was full of people. They stood along the walls, faces half hidden in shadow, watching me like I was a performance. At the foot of my bed, Lord Therion sat in my only chair, his staff resting across his knees, as if it belonged in my life. Princess Valeth leaned against the doorframe, smiling. King Caelen stood behind them all, farther back, his face unreadable, his eyes refusing to meet mine. Relief hit me so hard it turned into pain. My chest ached with it. I stepped toward him. Caelen? He did not move. Lord Therion's voice came smooth as polished wood. See, even your hope is borrowed. You thought the crown looked at you, but it was only strategy. You are a tool to him. Valeth laughed softly. A cheap tool. I turned. Back to Caelen. Desperate. Humiliatingly desperate. Is it true? He finally looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something I had seen before in the palace, something that had crushed me over and over. Indifference. My knees went weak. The vault had found the oldest wound in me, the one I never admitted, the fear that I was unlovable, that even when someone noticed me, it was only because they needed something. The voices pressed in. Say something. Beg. Explain yourself. Prove you deserve to be here. I heard Caelen's voice in my memory instead, low and fierce. Say no as a decision. I lifted my chin. I looked straight at the false version of him, the one the vault had crafted to break me, and I spoke clearly. No. The room flickered. Lord Therion's smile twitched. No? No, I repeated. You do not get to tell me what his choice means. Valeth's eyes narrowed. You think you can speak to us that way? I took a step forward, just like Caelen had shown me. Not backward, not shrinking. I can, I said, because I am here, and I am done being spoken over. The attic shattered like glass. I was back in the root vault chamber, The pale tree in the center, the carved law watching me like an accusation. The roots beneath my feet tightened, and a tendril rose from the stone, sliding around my ankle, then another around my calf. They were not squeezing yet, but they were testing. The vault wanted me on my knees. I reached for the dagger that had been placed on the table in Caelen's room. It was still tucked into my belt, hidden under the riverstone fabric. My fingers closed around the hilt. This is not for killing. It is for remembering you are allowed to take up space. I did not yank my leg away. I stepped in. The motion surprised the roots. The tendrils loosened, just enough for me to bend, blade low, and slice the living vine from my ankle. Sap oozed, glowing faintly green, and the severed root recoiled like a wounded snake. The chamber hummed, almost angry. A deep creak rolled through the walls, as if something older than the palace had shifted in its sleep. The whispers changed. Now they were softer, more intimate, more cruel. "Aelira," a voice said gently. My mother's voice. My breath caught so violently it felt like drowning. I had not heard her voice in years, not truly, only in dreams that faded when I woke. The vault produced it perfectly, warm and tired, and full of the kind of love that makes you believe the world cannot hurt you. "Aelira, my little leaf," the voice whispered. "Come here." Tears stung my eyes before I could stop them. My hands shook around the dagger. The pale tree's branches above rustled though there was no wind. A shadow moved among them, shifting into a familiar silhouette. My mother stepped out of the dark. Her hair was braided the way it always had been. Her hands were stained with dye from the outpost cloth she used to make. She smiled, and my heart split. I took one step without thinking. Then I remembered something that saved me. Clarity, not rescue. The vault did not know my mother. It only knew my longing. I pressed my fingers into the carved leaf token hidden in my sleeve. The bark edge bit into my skin. Rain on stone, I thought. Rain on stone. Rain on stone. At first nothing happened. Then, faintly, beneath the whispers and the hum, I heard it. Drip, drip. A steady sound, like water falling into a shallow stream and striking smooth rock. The voice of my mother faltered. Her smile trembled. I looked at her and forced the truth out. The truth that hurt. "You are not her," I whispered. The figure's eyes darkened. The smile twisted into something empty. The illusion lunged. I stepped in again, not away, and slashed across the space between us. The dagger did not cut flesh. It cut mist, and the figure shredded into smoke that evaporated into the roots. The chamber went silent for one long second. Then the vault spoke in a new voice, deep and ancient, not male or female, not kind, stubborn. The roots under my feet shifted, opening a narrow passage where there had been stone. The green glow flowed into it like a trail. I followed the sound of dripping water. The corridor dipped downward until the air grew colder and wetter. The dripping became a trickle, then a quiet stream running through a channel carved into the rock. The water was so clear, it looked like moving glass, and it reflected the root glow like stars. I crouched beside it, breathing hard. A shape moved. On the other side of the stream, a hooded figure emerged from the shadows, silent as a cat, a blade already in hand. "Hold," the figure said, voice low. I froze, dagger raised but uncertain. The hood pulled back slightly, revealing a woman's face, sharp-boned, older than me, with eyes the color of burnt amber. A scar ran from her temple to her jaw, pale against her skin. "You're Aelira," she said, not a question. "The king's new problem." My pulse hammered. "Who are you?" The woman's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Nira Thornvale." The name hit like a secret door opening. This was the one Caelen had spared, the one who owed him. "You will guide me out," I said, more hope than certainty. Nira glanced upward, as if listening through stone. "If the vault lets you," she replied. "It does not like being challenged, and you've done a fair bit of that already." Something shifted behind me. In the dark, heavy and deliberate, Nira's eyes snapped toward it. "We are not alone." The stream's surface trembled, tiny ripples running across it as if a huge weight had pressed into the stone nearby. A low, grinding sound filled the corridor, like roots dragging across rock. Nira grabbed my wrist hard. "Run!" she hissed. "What is it?" I gasped. Nira did not answer, because the thing in the darkness finally stepped into the root glow, and I saw antlers made of twisted wood, and eyes lit from within by cold green fire. "Approve this part, and I'll continue with the next." The creature stepped fully into the glow, and the corridor felt suddenly too small for my lungs. Its body was shaped like a stag, but not any stag that ever ran beneath open sky. This thing was built from the Evergrove's will. Its hide looked like bark grown over muscle, its antlers twisted upward like roots reaching for light, each tine etched with faint runes that pulsed in time with the stream's ripples. When it breathed, The air carried the scent of crushed leaves and old blood. Nira's fingers bit into my wrist. "Run," she had said. My legs finally obeyed. We sprinted along the channel beside the stream, boots slipping on wet stone. The vault did not echo the way a normal cavern would. Sound vanished into the roots, swallowed like confession. That made the creature's pursuit worse. I could not track it by noise. I could only feel it, a pressure behind us, heavy and patient, as if it did not need speed to win. My chest burned. My throat tried to close. I remembered the vial and forced myself to swallow the last taste of it, as if the memory alone could keep the air from turning against me. Nira glanced over her shoulder once, then spat a curse under her breath. "It's a warden," she said. "What does that mean?" I gasped. "It means the vault got tired of playing with your head," she replied. "Now it wants your body." We rounded a bend, and the passage split into two narrow tunnels. One was flooded ankle deep, water dark as ink. The other rose sharply, dry, but lined with root spines like teeth. Nira didn't hesitate. She shoved me toward the rising tunnel. "Up!" she ordered. I stumbled onto the dry path, my palms catching on rough bark. The roots did not cut me, but they scratched, as if they were warning me that the vault could still choose pain if it pleased. Behind us, the stream rippled violently. The warden's antlers scraped the stone as it followed, too large for the space, but still pushing forward. The sound finally reached us, a deep grinding that vibrated through my bones. Nira pulled a small vial from her belt, not the same kind the maid had given me. This one was dark, almost black. "Hold your breath," she said. Before I could ask why, she flung the liquid onto the tunnel floor. The dark substance spread instantly, like spilled night, and for a heartbeat the root glow dimmed. The warden entered the shadow and recoiled. Its eyes flared brighter, furious. It stamped, and the stone trembled under my feet. "What was that?" I whispered. "Old sap and salt," Nira said, breathing hard. "It hates anything that reminds it we are not roots. We are flesh." The warden lowered its head and pushed again. The darkness thinned, burning away like fog under sun, but it had bought us time. Nira grabbed my elbow and hauled me upward. We climbed until my legs shook and my lungs screamed. The tunnel narrowed into a crack where we had to turn sideways, shoulders scraping stone. Nira moved like she'd been born in tight spaces. I moved like someone who had spent her life, trying not to take up room. At last, we burst into a wider chamber. I nearly collapsed. The ceiling was low, threaded with thick roots that hung like ropes. In the center of the room stood a pool so still it looked like polished glass. The green glow gathered around it, brighter than anywhere else, as if the vault fed its light into this single place. Nira crouched beside the pool, listening. "It's not far," she murmured. "What is this place?" asked, voice shaking. Nira's gaze flicked to me, sharp. "A threshold. The vault likes thresholds. Choices. It thinks choices reveal truth." My stomach twisted. "And what truth does it want from me?" Nira leaned closer, her tone low, almost reluctant. "Whether you are worth the king's defiance." Hearing him called the king like that, stripped of his name, made something in me flare. "Caelen is not a prize," I said. Nira's mouth tightened like she approved and hated it at the same time. "Good. Keep that anger. You'll need it." The grinding sound returned, faint, but getting closer. The warden was climbing. Nira reached into her cloak and pulled out something I had not seen before, a thin chain with a small crescent charm at the end. It looked ordinary until she held it over the pool. The water responded, the surface trembled, then brightened, and an image formed as if the pool had become a window. My breath caught. King Caelen stood in a candlelit room, hands braced on a table, his shoulders rigid. He was speaking to someone I could not see. "They will try to break her," he said, voice tight with controlled fury. "If the vault rejects her, the council will call it the Evergrove's will. And if she dies, they will say it was necessary." A pause, then his voice softened, and the sound of it made my chest hurt in a new way. I should have gone in myself. I stared, stunned by the rawness I heard. Nira watched my face, not the pool. "He really did choose you," she said quietly. "Not because you were safe, because you were dangerous to his enemies." My throat tightened. "What do you want from me?" Nira exhaled, as if she had been holding this back for years. "I want you to survive long enough to make his choice matter, and I want you to understand what you stepped into." The image in the pool shifted, showing the cord of branches, empty now, moonlight pouring through leaves. Lord Tharian's voice echoed, as if the pool carried memory, the trial of roots. Nira's fingers tightened on the crescent charm. "They say the law keeps peace," she said, "but the law is a cage built after a massacre. The 7 lines used it to make sure the crown would never again love freely. Love makes kings unpredictable." My pulse jumped. Love? Nira's eyes narrowed slightly. Do not pretend you did not feel it. Not love yet, perhaps, but the beginning of something. The vault will use that too. The grinding sound grew louder. A shadow moved at the tunnel mouth. The warden's eyes appeared first, glowing like two cold stars. Its antlers scraped the stone as it squeezed forward, impossibly persistent. Nira stood, drawing her blade. There's only one way past it, she said. My mouth went dry. How? Nira looked at the still pool, then at me, as if measuring my spine. You have to make the vault choose a different target, she said. You have to offer it something it wants more than your fear. I clutched the dagger at my belt, remembering Caelen's hand around mine, the way he had said my name like a vow. And what does it want? I whispered. Nira's voice dropped to a dangerous hush. The truth of your blood. The warden lunged into the chamber, roots snapping under its weight, and the pool, as if awakened, began to glow brighter beneath my feet. The warden hit the edge of the pool like a falling tree. Stone shuddered. The still water trembled, and for a moment the glowing surface looked like it might crack. Nira moved fast, blade up, feet planted, but I could see in the tightness of her shoulders that she was not expecting to win by force. She was buying seconds. My dagger felt heavy at my side, useless against a thing made of root and judgment. The truth of your blood, I whispered, tasting the words like iron. Nira's eyes flashed to mine. Now, before it pins you, cut your palm and feed the pool. My stomach lurched. Why would the vault want that? It wants a reason, she said. Voice clipped as the warden's hooves scraped closer. Fear is easy. It can drink fear from anyone. Blood is different. Blood tells it who you really are. The warden lowered its head, antlers angling toward me like a sentence. I remembered Caelen's lesson. Step in, do not pull away. So I stepped toward the pool, not toward the warden, but toward the only thing in this room that felt like a door instead of a wall. My hand shook as I drew the dagger. I held it low, as Caelen had shown me, not like a soldier, like someone refusing to be grabbed. Then I turned the blade carefully and pressed the edge into my palm. Pain flashed sharp and clean. I gasped, then clenched my jaw and dragged the blade just enough for blood to bead. The scent changed immediately. The air sharpened, alive, like the Evergrove was suddenly awake and paying attention. Nira backed toward me, blade still raised. Drip it in, she ordered, and do not lie to it. I knelt at the pool's edge. The glowing surface reflected my face, pale and wild-eyed. For a heartbeat I hesitated, terrified of what truth might actually mean. Then I let the blood fall. One drop. The pool swallowed it, and the light inside the water flared as if someone had struck a match in the deep. The warden froze mid-step. Its glowing eyes narrowed, not with anger now, but with recognition. The roots overhead tightened, and the chamber hummed like a string pulled taut. A voice rose from the pool, ancient and close, as if it spoke from inside my ribs. Name yourself. My breath came shallow. My mind scrambled for an answer that would not get me killed. I am Aelira, I said. The pool brightened again. Not enough. The voice returned, colder. Name your line. My stomach dropped. I had no line, no house, no crest, no embroidery. I was a ward, a leftover. I glanced at Nira, panic in my eyes. Nira's face had gone still, her gaze fixed on the pool, as if she could already see what it was about to show. Tell it what you know, she said quietly, then let it show you the rest. I swallowed hard. I do not know my line, I whispered. My mother never spoke of it. She died at the border outpost. I was taken in by the palace as a child. That is all I know. The water pulsed. The chamber seemed to inhale. Then the pool pulled me under without touching my skin. Suddenly I was standing in rain. Not the vaults dripping, but real rain. Heavy, pounding stone, slicking the earth into black mud. I blinked and found myself at the border outpost I barely remembered, the place of my earliest nightmares. Torches burned along the wooden walls. Soldiers shouted. The smell of smoke and wet wool filled my nose. I turned and saw my mother. Not an illusion built from longing this time. She moved with a purpose that made my throat close. She wore a plain cloak, but beneath it, I caught a flash of embroidery at her wrist, a pattern of curling thorns and a crescent leaf, hidden, deliberate. She pushed me behind a stacked crate and pressed a cold object into my small hands, a carved leaf token, the same one in my sleeve now. Listen to me, little leaf, she said, voice urgent. Eyes shining with fear she tried to hide. If anyone asks, you are nobody. You understand? Nobody. The safest name is silence. Child me nodded, trembling. My mother cupped my face with both hands, and her palms were stained with something dark. Blood, not hers, someone else's. You carry something they will kill you for, she whispered. Not because it is evil, because it is older than their power. A horn sounded in the distance. Shouts, footsteps. My mother's eyes snapped toward the door. She leaned in and spoke the last truth she ever gave me. You are of the Thornbloom line, she said. The line they erased from the seven because we would not bow. My chest seized. Thornbloom, like near a Thornvale, but not the same. Adjacent, twisted from the same root. The memory rushed forward. I watched my mother lift her hands and speak to someone I could not see, her voice low, trembling, furious. You promised the king would protect us. A shadow moved at the edge of the torchlight. A man in a dark cloak stepped forward, face hidden. Not Caelen. Too young then, or not yet king. A council agent. He raised a hand. My mother shoved the crate harder in front of me. Do not come out, she hissed. Then everything went wrong. A blade flashed. My mother staggered. Her cloak fell open, and the hidden embroidery at her wrist burned in torchlight like a confession. The agent whispered one word, sharp and satisfied. Thornbloom. The memory shattered. I was, back in the root vault, kneeling by the glowing pool, blood still dripping slowly from my palm into its light. My whole body trembled, not from cold, but from the weight of what I had just seen. The voice in the pool spoke again, different now, not cold, known. Thornbloom returns. The warden lowered its head, not to strike, but to bow. Nira sucked in a breath, her eyes wide for the first time. By the roots, she whispered. They told us your line was gone. I stared at the warden, stunned. What does this mean? Nira's gaze snapped up to the ceiling, as if she could see through stone and politics and lies. It means the council did not just try to control the king, she said. They rewrote the realm. The pool brightened until the chamber looked flooded with green starlight. Heat rushed up my arm from the cut on my palm, not burning, but marking. A faint pattern began to appear on my skin, thin as vein lines, curling like thorns around my wrist. A brand, a claim, and somewhere far above I felt it, as if a thread had snapped tight between us. Caelen. His name filled my mind, and with it came a sudden image, sharp and unwanted. He was on his knees in a dark room, one hand pressed to his chest like something had stabbed him from the inside. His eyes were wide with shock, and when he whispered my name, it sounded like prayer and fear tangled together. Aelira. Nira grabbed my shoulder. We have to move, she said urgently. The vault accepted you. Now it will open a path, but the moment you step out, the council will realize what you are. The warden lifted its head. The roots on the far wall began to unwind, revealing a narrow doorway where there had been stone. Beyond it, I heard voices, not whispers, real voices, guards, close, steel shifting, someone laughing, softly, delighted. Princess Vaelith. Nira's grip tightened. They did not wait, she breathed. They are already here. Tell me if you approve this part, and I will continue with the next. The doorway the roots revealed was too narrow for comfort, like the vault wanted to squeeze the last fear out of me before letting me go. Nira went first, blade raised. I followed, clutching my bleeding palm against the riverstone fabric. The mark on my wrist was brighter now, thin thorn-like lines curling up my skin, as if they had always been there and were only just choosing to show themselves. We stepped through. Torchlight stabbed my eyes. The air changed again, less damp, more metallic, filled with the scent of oil and sharpened steel. They were waiting. 3 guards stood at the base of the stairwell with spears angled forward. Behind them were 2 counselors, faces tight with anticipation. And there, as if she had dressed for a celebration, Princess Vaelith leaned against the stone wall in a gown of pale gold, her sunstone glowing softly at her throat. She smiled when she saw me. Not relief, not surprise. Hunger. Well, she said, voice light. She came back. One of the counselors stepped forward, eyes snapping to my wrist. I saw it then, the exact moment recognition hit him, his face drained of color. Lord Tharion emerged from the, shadows behind them, his staff tapping once against the stone like a judge calling for silence. I felt it, he said. The vault's hum changed. The roots recognized something. My stomach turned cold. You knew. Tharion's eyes gleamed. I suspected. A ward with no record of lineage, placed conveniently inside the palace, old enough now to be used as a spark. His Majesty thought he was being clever. Vaelith's gaze flicked to Caelen's empty place, on the stairs above, then back to me. But sparks can be snuffed, she murmured. Nira stepped into full torchlight, and several guards jolted as if they had seen a ghost. Thornvale, one of them hissed. Tharion's mouth tightened, annoyed but not surprised. Of course, the king's mercy pet crawls out of her hole to escort the girl. Nira's blade didn't move, but her voice sharpened. Stand down. The trial is complete. The vault accepted her. Tharion lifted his staff slightly. The vault is not the law. It is older than your law, I said, surprising even myself with the steadiness in my tone. Vaelith laughed softly. Listen to her. She thinks acceptance makes her untouchable. I took a breath. Slow, like Caelen taught me. Let your silence become your blade. I didn't rush to explain. I let them feel the weight of my presence instead. Tharian's gaze fixed on my wrist again. Show it. No, I said. His eyes narrowed. You forget your place. I stepped forward. Just one step. Not shrinking. Not pleading. My place is not yours to assign, I answered. My voice shook at the edges, but it held. For the first time, Valeth's smile faltered, just slightly. Then it returned, brighter, crueler. Then we will assign it for you, she said, and nodded toward the guards. Take her. The spears shifted. Nira moved like lightning, blade, flashing up to hook one spear aside before it could thrust. She did not strike, not yet, but she made her point. The guards hesitated. Tharian's voice went cold. Do you want to die here, Thornvale? Nira's eyes burned. Not today. I felt something twist inside me, a thread pulled taut. It started in my marked wrist and traveled up my arm, across my chest, and then it snapped into clarity. Caelen was close. I could feel him like a presence. Behind a door, a boot struck stone above us, then another. A shadow moved across the stairwell, and King Caelen appeared at the top step, not wearing his crown, but wearing armor beneath a dark cloak. 2 royal guards flanked him, their helms down, their blades drawn. His gaze locked on me instantly, not on the counselors, not on Valeth, on me. His eyes dropped to my wrist, and something raw crossed his face, so fast the others might miss it. Shock, relief, rage. He descended the steps with the calm of someone who had already decided how far he was willing to go. Enough, he said. Lord Tharian straightened. Your Majesty, the girl has returned, yes, but she has returned marked. Thornbloom marked. The word hit the stairwell like a thrown knife. The guard stiffened. One of the counselors took a half step back, as if the name itself could contaminate him. Caelen's expression did not change, but the air around him seemed to sharpen. You speak that name like an accusation, he said. It is a warning, Tharian snapped. That line was erased for good reason. They refused the binding edict. They challenged the council's authority. They stirred rebellion. I swallowed. My palm throbbed. My wrist tingled. They murdered my mother, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. Not because she was evil, because she would not bow. Valeth tilted her head, pretending fascination. Tragic, but useful. Caelen's eyes flicked toward her, and for a moment the king's patience looked like a thin sheet of ice over deep water. Valeth, he said quiet, step away from her. Valeth's smile widened. Or what? Caelen stepped down to the last stair and stopped between me and the council, placing his body as a barrier without touching me. Or I will end your courtship and your treaties in the same breath, he replied. Tharian lifted his staff again, angry now. You cannot threaten the Sun Court. You cannot rewrite the law because your heart pulled you toward a pretty ward. Caelen's voice dropped. Dangerous. This is not my heart. This is the Evergrove. He reached out, palm up, not commanding me, asking. My breath caught. My whole body remembered taking his hand in the court of branches. The moment it had changed, everything. I placed my hand in his. The mark on my wrist flared, and I felt the bond tighten like a knot being pulled secure. Several torches hissed, their flames bending toward us. Even the stone under our feet seemed to vibrate. Nira sucked in a breath. The roots are responding, she murmured. Tharian's face shifted, alarm sliding through his anger. No. Caelen lifted our joined hands slightly, showing the mark to everyone without forcing me to display it. The trial of roots was invoked, he said. The vault judged her. It accepted her. By the oldest rites of the Evergrove, that acceptance is legitimacy. Tharian's mouth went thin. Old rites are not law. They are the foundation beneath your law, Caelen said. And I will not allow you to hide behind tradition when tradition is only your mask. Valeth's sunstone pulsed brighter. Her smile finally vanished. You will set her. Beside you, she said, voice tight. And you expect the realm to obey. Caelen's gaze did not leave her. I expect the realm to live. Valeth's fingers brushed her sunstone like a lover. Then let us see how much it loves you when it learns what she is. And before anyone could stop her, she lifted her chin and called out, her voice ringing up the stairwell and into the corridors beyond. Thornbloom has returned, the words echoed, multiplying. As they ran through stone like water through cracks. Somewhere above I heard feet moving, fast, voices rising. The palace was waking. Tharian's eyes glittered. Now you have done it, he hissed to Caelen. Now the 7 lines will come. Now the old fear will rise, and when it rises it will not ask who is innocent. Caelen's grip tightened on my hand, just slightly, not possessive, protective. He leaned close enough that only I could hear him. Do not let them make you small, he murmured. My throat tightened. I'm trying. He looked at me then, fully, and the world narrowed to the steadiness in his eyes. I am not, he whispered back. I will not. A horn sounded above, not ceremonial, an alarm. Nira moved to my other side, blade ready. They are gathering, she said. If Tharion gets a council vote before dawn, he will try to depose the king. Valeth smiled again, but now it was sharp and satisfied. Good luck surviving the night, little leaf. The torches flickered as if the palace itself had shivered, and I realized the trial had not ended in the vault. It had only moved into the open. Tell me if you approve this part, and I will continue with the next. The alarm horn kept calling through the palace like a wounded animal. It wasn't a sound meant to warn the common halls. It was meant to summon power. The 7 lines would hear it, and come dressed in old authority, pretending they were the Evergrove itself. King Caelen did not rush. That was the first thing I noticed. While the corridors above us filled with boots and shouting, he stood at the stairwell landing with my hand still in his shoulders squared, as if he could hold the entire palace steady by refusing to tremble. Nira moved first, sliding ahead like a shadow with a blade. This way, she said. There's an older passage. If Tharion reaches the council chamber, he'll try to crown himself regent before dawn. Caelen's jaw tightened. He'll try to crown my leash. Valeth's laughter echoed behind us as guards shifted. Run then, she called. Let the realm see its king fleeing for a ward. The insult should have cut me the way it always used to. Instead, it struck something harder inside me. I felt the thorn mark on my wrist pulse, not with rage, but with a cold, steady refusal. Caelen leaned close, his voice barely a breath. Aelira, if they separate us, do not bargain, do not plead. I swallowed. What do I do? He looked at me with that winter-calm intensity that made me believe in impossible things. Stand. Nira led us through a side archway, just as the stairwell filled with incoming guards. Steel flashed. A spear struck the stone where I'd been standing a heartbeat. Earlier, Caelen pulled me forward, and we vanished into the palace's hidden veins. We ran through narrow corridors behind tapestries, down spiral steps that smelled of dust and old rain, past sealed doors carved with ancient crests. I caught glimpses of torchlight through cracks, heard voices shouting Tharion's name, heard other voices shouting the king's. Then a new sound rose beneath it all, low and deep, like the Evergrove itself clearing its throat. The roots were waking. We emerged into the winter gallery, the place where I'd first seen Caelen with the law tablet. The candle orbs trembled as if the air had turned to storm, and there, waiting in the center of the gallery, stood Lord Tharion with a ring of council guards and 2 noble lords in house colors, their faces pale with excitement. He smiled when he saw us, the expression of a man who believes the ending is already written. Your Majesty, he said, how kind of you to return to the source of your rebellion. Caelen stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of me without breaking my handhold. You invoked the trial of roots. Yes, Tharion replied smoothly, and the vault returned her. How inconvenient. His eyes dropped to my wrist again. The thorn mark was brighter now, curling up my forearm like living ink. You carry a forbidden line, he said. The thorn bloom were erased for threatening unity. The 7 lines will never accept her. The Sun Court will never accept her. And the realm will not bleed for your romance. I felt my cut palm throb, still healing. I lifted my chin. My mother was killed because she refused to bow. Tharion's smile didn't move. Your mother was killed because she forgot her place. Something in me went cold, crystal clear. I saw the outpost again in my mind. The blade flash, the whisper of Thornbloom, the dark cloak. I stared at Tharion's staff, at the grip wrapping near his hand, where the leather was worn, and beneath that, a faint pattern, almost invisible unless you knew to look. Curling thorns and a crescent leaf stitched into the underlayer. My breath caught. Nira saw it too. Her face hardened with a fury so old it looked like bone. You, she said, voice low. You were there. Tharion's eyes flicked to her, and for the first time his calm cracked. Mind your tongue, Thornvale. Nira took 1 step forward. You murdered Thornbloom refugees at the border. You broke the king's father's promises. You used the binding edict to keep the crown obedient. Tharion lifted his staff, and the guards tightened their circle. Careful. Accusations without proof are treason. I moved before my fear could stop me. I stepped beside Caelen, fully visible, fully in the line of threat. The vault showed me, I said. My voice shook once, then steadied. It showed me my mother hiding me. It showed me the man in the dark cloak. It showed me the word you whispered when you struck her. Tharion's gaze sharpened like a knife. What word was that? He asked softly. Dangerous. I met his eyes. Thornbloom. The candle orbs hissed. One of the noble lords behind Tharion shifted uneasily, as if the name had teeth. Tharion laughed once. Short. A pretty story. Convenient. Unprovable. Caelen's voice cut through the gallery like a blade drawn clean. It is provable. Tharion's smile returned. Is it? Caelen turned his head slightly, and spoke a single word toward the dark archway behind us. Warden. The air changed. The roots in the gallery walls creaked. The candle orbs dimmed as if something older than flame had entered. A low grinding rolled through the stone, and the warden of the root vault stepped into the winter gallery, antlers scraping the arch, eyes lit with cold green fire. Every guard went rigid. One dropped to a knee without meaning to. The warden lowered its head, not toward Caelen, toward me. The gallery held its breath. Tharian's face drained of color. Caelen lifted our joined hands, calm, relentless. The trial invoked the oldest witness. The Evergrove accepted her line, and by the clause you carved away from the law tablet, the Evergrove's choice overrules the council's leash. Tharian's eyes flashed. There is no such clause. Caelen nodded once, as if he'd expected the lie. Then he reached to the law tablet and pressed his palm against the carved letters. The moonstone flared, and the letters shifted, not changing, but revealing what had been hidden beneath a shallow layer of recarving. Faint script, older, deeper, written by hands that believed law should serve the realm, not cage it. The Elf King must take a political bride, unless the Evergrove names won by root mark, in which case the crown must honor the grove's will, and the council must yield. A silence fell so thick it felt like snowfall. Tharian's mouth opened, closed. His eyes darted to the noble lords, searching for support. One of them swallowed hard and stepped back, then another. They were not loyal to truth. They were loyal to whatever could not be defied. The warden's presence made defiance feel like suicide. Valeth's voice rang from the corridor entrance behind Tharian, sharp and furious. This is sorcery. She strode in, sunstone blazing at her throat, her eyes locked on me like a spear. You think the grove chooses you, she hissed. You think that makes you queen, but the realm needs treaties. It needs stability. It needs me. She raised her hand, and the sunstone flared, throwing warm light across the moonstone. Heat rippled through the air. For a heartbeat, I thought she would burn me where I stood. Instead, she aimed the heat at the law tablet. The moonstone shrieked. Cracks raced across it like lightning. Caelen lunged, too late. I moved without thinking, not backward, in. I threw my bleeding hand onto the moonstone, pressing my palm hard against the fractures. Pain shot up my arm, bright and vicious. The thorn mark on my wrist ignited, lines curling tighter, and the roots in the walls surged forward. They did not attack Valeth. They wrapped the law tablet. They held it. They stitched the cracks with living fiber, sealing the stone as if the Evergrove itself had decided this truth would not be broken again. Valeth staggered back, staring at her own hand as if it had betrayed her. Tharian's eyes widened with horror, and he made a decision. He turned to run. Nira moved faster. Her blade flashed, not to kill, but to hook the staff from his hand. The staff clattered across the stone. Tharian stumbled, and roots erupted from the floor, coiling around his ankles, yanking him down onto his knees. He hit the stone hard. Breath knocked from his lungs. Caelen stepped toward him, face like winter. Tharian lifted his chin anyway, defiant too. The end. If you spare me, it will look weak. Caelen's voice was quiet. If I kill you, it will look like you. Tharian's eyes flicked toward me, and hate twisted his mouth. She will ruin you. I met his gaze. You already ruined the realm. I'm just the proof you buried. The warden lowered its head again, and the roots tightened until Tharian could not move. Caelen turned to Valeth. She stood very still now, her sunstone dimming, her pride bleeding out through the cracks in her composure. This was never about love, she said, voice tight. It was about power. You made me promise my court I would return with you bound to us. Caelen's eyes did not soften, but his voice did, just slightly. Then return with a different promise. Valeth blinked. What? That the Evergrove has spoken, Caelen said. That the council lied. That the realm will not be bought by a marriage contract. Valeth's lips parted, a protest rising, then dying when she looked at the warden, at the roots, at the truth glowing beneath moonstone. And if I refuse, she whispered. Caelen's expression turned hard again. Then you leave as an enemy. For the first time, Valeth looked afraid. Not of Caelen, of being powerless. She swallowed, her chin lifted, pride clawing at her spine. I will not kneel, she said. I did not ask you to, Caelen replied. I asked you to stop trying to make everyone else. Valeth stared at me then, really stared, as if seeing something she hadn't wanted to admit. You don't even know what it means to sit beside him, she said quietly. They will hate you. I felt the thorn mark pulse, steady and alive. I felt the weight of eyes that had always wanted me invisible. I know, I said, but I also know what it means to be used and discarded. I won't let them do it to him or to this realm. Valeth's throat moved. She looked away, like the truth offended her. Then, with a stiff grace, she turned and walked out of the gallery, her gold gown trailing behind her like a sunset leaving the sky. The palace above us roared with voices, but the winter gallery had become a still center in the storm. Caelen faced the noble lords and the gathered guards. "The council will be dissolved," he said. "A new assembly will be formed with representation from the outposts, the border holds, and the lines that were silenced. The binding edict will be restored in full. The Evergrove is not your tool. It never was." Some looked angry, some looked relieved, most looked afraid, but none argued, because the roots were listening, and because the warden stood like the grove's judgment made flesh. Later, when the palace finally quieted into exhausted silence, Caelen took me to the Court of Branches again. Dawn was beginning to bleach the sky, pale and tentative. The leaves overhead held beads of dew that glimmered like tiny moons. The root throne sat empty, waiting. Caelen stopped beneath the canopy and turned to face me. The first light caught his hair, turning it almost white. His eyes looked older than they had the day before, older and freer. "It should have been simpler," he said quietly. I let out a breath that shook. "Nothing about you is simple." A faint smile touched his mouth. "Nothing about you either." He reached into his cloak and pulled out the crown. Not the one he wore for ceremony. This one was different, finer, woven with thorn-patterned silver and a single moonstone set at the center. Its light soft, steady. My throat tightened. "Caelen," he stepped closer, holding it carefully, like it could cut him if he handled it wrong. "I needed a political bride," he said. "That was the cage they built around me, but the grove did what it has always done. It found the crack and pushed life through it." His eyes dropped to my wrist, to the thorn mark that had become part of me. Then he looked back up. "I broke my own law for you," he said. "Not the council's law. My law, the one I made after my first mercy, when I promised myself I would never again put someone in the path of my enemies." Tears stung my eyes. "And yet you did." "Yes," he admitted, his voice roughened. "Because when I saw you in that gallery, hiding in plain sight, I realized something. I have been hiding too, behind duty, behind tradition, behind fear of becoming the kind of king who burns everything down." He lifted a hand, not touching me yet. "Aelira, I don't want you as a shield. I don't want you as a symbol. I want you because you stood when every voice told you to kneel." My breath caught on a sob I didn't want to show him. "I was nobody," I whispered. He shook his head. "You were someone they were afraid to name." He raised the crown. I did not bow my head. I stayed upright, meeting his gaze, letting dawn witness what night had tried to erase. Caelen placed the crown gently onto my hair, and the moonstone at its center glowed once, like a quiet heartbeat. The roots overhead rustled, and a few pale blossoms opened among the leaves, thorn-edged and beautiful, thornbloom. I pressed my hand to his chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heart beneath armor and vows. "I don't know how to be what they think a queen is," I whispered. Caelen's hand covered mine, warm and sure. "Then don't be." He leaned closer, forehead nearly touching mine. "Be what you already are," he murmured. "The beginning of something they can't control." When he kissed me, it wasn't like the songs. It was quiet, real, a promise made without an audience. And for the first time in my life, being seen did not feel like danger. It felt like coming home.